In 1871, the city of Chicago was met with a great tragedy. 3 days in the middle of October, half of the city was set ablaze, and a third of its population was left homeless. Almost immediately after the fire was put out, its residents put together a great reconstruction effort to put the city back to where it was prior to the fire. One newspaper even printing that the residents should cheer up and that Chicago shall rise again. It took 13 long years, but the city that was once engulfed in flames was put back together and continued to grow into a rising force in the modern world. Now fast forward to 1998, where Chicago would see the emergence of another fire. In the form of a soccer club, the Chicago Fire started out just as well as its namesake city, winning the league title in its very first year, as well as 4 US Open Cups to date. It looked like the Chicago Fire Soccer Club would become one of the premier teams in Major League Soccer. However, in 2007, the club was sold to new owners who have made nothing but bad moves, both on the field and off. Coach after coach, player after player, there just isn't that same spark or passion that the older teams have had. Now all we have is just the smoldering ashes of shame and failure. This is going to be the story of reconstruction, a story of reignition, the story of the great Chicago Fire. What's going on, guys? It's Gendo here. Hope you're having a good day, and welcome to a new series where I try to take the Chicago Fire from the depths of the MLS basement all the way back up to their former glory, the top of the MLS, and maybe even beyond. But of course, before we get to that, we must go over the entirety of what we're dealing with. We gotta go over the history, we gotta go over the players, and then of course, throw in a little bit of the MLS jargon in there, because I need to inform you. I need to inform as well as entertain the idea of you taking over an MLS team and try and get you suitably prepared with all the inner workings of the MLS club and the MLS in general. So right from the start, let's take a look at this front page. Chicago predicted to finish 10th. Now I know what you're thinking. Brian, there are 22 teams in the MLS. Why does it say Chicago's going to finish in 10th? Well, it's broken down into 2 conferences, a Western and an Eastern Conference, because that's just how the American system works. They do have a supporter shield where they tally up the overall records of the teams in the entirety of the MLS, but more than likely you want to try and finish in the top half of your conference, because that is what pushes you into the MLS Cup playoffs. I know, once again, it's the MLS system. Try and bear with me here. I love how it says owner status loves the club. That is a lie, and I'll tell you why in a bit. Our team is apparently worth $173 million. Toyota Park, 20,000 all-seater. Impressive training facilities, average use facilities. That's fine and dandy. Let's get right into it. All right, so we get into our very first screen, and the first thing we notice is in the mail, we have MLS contract and registration information. Now, I'm not going to read that word for word because 1, that'll be boring, and 2, you probably wouldn't understand it. So I'm going to try and simplify it as much as possible, but basically the rules of the squad registration are as follows. You need to have 3, a maximum of 3 designated players on your roster. You know, it just dawned on me that I never explained what the designated player rule was, and it's simply this. If you have a player that is paid more than $475,000 per year, that amount, that $475,000 is only added to the salary cap hit. So you could pay him upwards of $5 million, $6 million like Stevie G and Frank Lampard are, but only $475,000 is taken off of the salary cap. Got it? Each team starts out with 8 international slots, and those can be designated for non-US and Canadian players. So anybody you're bringing in from outside of US and Canada is designated as an international player. Those slots can be traded between teams back and forth, so you can have more than 8, you can have less than 8. And finally, the reserve players are basically players that are not of senior status, which is basically 23 years or older, that really don't register as anything on the salary cap. cap. They don't really count as a penalty towards the salary cap and if you try and remove them before the squad registration in March, if you try to remove them, they don't have any effect off the salary cap. They don't take anything away. All right, let's get into the history of the Chicago Fire, shall we? In 1996, the MLS had its first season. The Chicago Fire didn't form until December of 97, playing their first season in 1998. And what a fun season that was. Because not only was it their first full season in the MLS, it was the first and only season where they have done a domestic double. They won the MLS Cup playoffs, and then the following week they won the US Open Cup, which is amazing because I don't think a lot of teams in the MLS have done a domestic double like that. I think Chicago was the first, but I don't think a lot of other teams have done it since then. But taking a look at the first 5 years of the Chicago Fire, between 98 and 2003, was the most prosperous time to be a Chicago Fire player and supporter. They made the MLS Cup 2 more times, coming runners-up. They won the Supporter Shield in 2003, and then they won the U.S. Open Cup 4 times, a joint record with Seattle, 98, 2002, 2003, and then once again in 2006. They have not won a major title since that time, which is a little bit of a shame. Which, if you know the history, it's a little understandable to see why. Late in 2007, the Chicago Fire were bought by the name of Andrew Optimum, and since that time, Chicago Fire have only made the playoffs twice since 2007. They made it in 2008 and 2009, and that's it. That was the last time they were in the playoffs, and it's just been a constant stream of bad ins and outs of bad players and coaches, which, as you can see, led to the Chicago Fire finishing in dead last place last year. And fun fact, they repeated as dead last players this season as well, marking that the first time an MLS team has gone back-to-back last place in the Supporters' Shield. The Chicago Fire are in a bad way. It's not for lack of players. They have some decent players. I don't know if it's just the coaching that just doesn't want to get the most out of them or what. But now that I'm at the club, I'm going to make sure that they do what they're told and hopefully get ourselves out of the cellar. We may not make the playoffs first up, but let's get out of the cellar. Let's take a look at the players to see what we can do with this roster. Some are going to stay, some are going to go. Let's take a look and see what we got. Do not let the star rankings fool you. There are a lot of bad players that are sitting with 3 stars, 3.5 stars on this roster. But for the most part, I will say the top 4 on this list are the best players on the squad, and that is not going to change. Sean Johnson, vice captain for the club. He's been with the club for the last 6 years. He has played on the U.S. men's national team, and to be honest with you, he is going to be the starter for us for the long haul. I mean, just take a look at some of his stats. 14 in one-on-one, 16 in reflexes, decent mental stats, decent physical stats as well. He is the heart and soul of the back line, basically telling them what to do, trying to get them in the right position. And like I said, Sean Johnson, one of the players that's going to stick with us for a long time to come. Michael Deleu, 29-year-old Dutchman, actually came in the middle of this past season for the Chicago Fire, and to be quite honest with you, looks fairly good. I'm also surprised he's not on a designated player contract. But taking a look at some of his stats, 14 finishing, 14 composure, 17 off the ball, decent physical and mental stats. I mean, he is going to be the guy that is going to lead the line. He is the #1 striker for this team. Also, fun fact, he is one of 3 players that are Dutch on this squad, and Chicago Fire have 3 out of the 4 Dutch players in the MLS, the only other one being in the Philadelphia Union. Dutchman #2 for the Chicago Fire. It's a guy I honestly didn't rate very highly when he came in, but he proved me wrong during this entire season. It's Johan Kappelhoff, also coming in from FC Groningen. The 25-year-old looks fairly solid and is more than likely going to be the starting center back, one of my starting center backs on this club. 14 marking, 14 tackling, 12 positioning, decent physical stats right there. I mean, this kid, like I said, I didn't rate him highly, but he has proven me wrong over the course of the season. The one lone designated player that we have on our squad, David Akam, 25-year-old Ghanaian, who is basically a pace merchant, and that's about it. Great dribbling, great physicals, like I said, in the pace. He doesn't really like to finish. In real life, he's not a good finisher, but in the game, apparently 13 finishing. Okay, that's great and all, but I'm not going to try and use him as a striker. I want to try and use him as a winger, basically take that ball up the wings, force the defense to play out wide, then get the ball into the box to Deleu and get all these goals. All right, now that we're out of the top 4, it's time to start raking through the mud to see if there are any gems that we can find. And so far, I think João Mera is one of those players. He's a decent center back and more than likely going to be pairing up with Johan. 14 marking, 12 tackling, 13 positioning, decent physicals as well. Not that bad of a center back, but like I said, there really isn't a lot going down the line. João Mera more than likely will be the center backing pair. John Campbell, another center back. It's great that he's tall at 6'2", but other than that, he's average at best in all defensive categories as well as physical categories. More than likely going to be a backup. The next two guys are defensive mids by trade, and I'm going to swap them out in that position because I can't really, take them apart. Matt Polster, 22 years old, coming up through the Chicago Fire Academy. It looks pretty decent in that role. I mean, he can also play defensive right, but I want to try and use him as a defensive mid. 11 marking, 14 tackling. He's got great teamwork and work rate. Physicals, okay there. But let's take a look at the other guy, Kali Tiam. Kali Tiam, he's coming in on loan from MTK, which I have no idea where that's from. Is that from Hungary? Okay, he's coming in on loan from MTK Budapest in Hungary. The 22-year-old. He's got pretty much the same defensive stats and speed stats that Matt Polster does. He's a little bit more physical, so I don't know which one I want to go with going forward. We'll just figure it out as the season goes along. Brandon Vincent's one of the guys that we picked up out of college, and the 21-year-old not looking that bad whatsoever. He is also an internationally capped player at 21 years old. I believe he got capped during this past year. Very early this past year, so at least you can say he's an international. He looks fairly solid and may possibly be my starting left back. 12 marking, 11 tackling, 11 positioning, decent physicals as well. Matt Lamson, backup goalkeeper. That's pretty much all you could say about him. Just not that good when you compare him to Sean Johnson, especially when you take in shot stopping and the speed aspect. Michael Harrington came into the Chicago Fire at the start of this past season, of the 2016 season, and the 30-year-old looking fairly decent, could possibly be my starting right back. Depends on who is available to me. 11 marking, 11 tackling, 12 positioning, decent physicals as well. He's really strong. I like that. And also good stamina. So yeah, he could possibly be my starting right back. All right, now we're getting into the mud. Nick Labraca, 31-year-old midfielder, also came in during the start of this past season. He looks like a very adept, very all-around midfielder, but there are better options out there, either on my squad or if I try to trade someone in, there's got to be someone better. Another player that came in during the middle of this past season, Luis Solniak. We traded for him from the Colorado Rapids, and at 25 years old, looks fairly solid. I just don't like the fact that his attacking stats aren't very well developed. He's got 12 for finishing, but I like that he's fast at 15 pace, 14 acceleration. Some of his technical stats are great as well. The 14 first touch, 13 technique. He's just not going to be my first choice striker. Razvan Kokic, 33-year-old Romanian, still looks like he can get the job done. I don't see him really falling off the table stats-wise over the next couple years, so I want to try and keep him into the squad, keep him on the pitch, because I feel like him and Nick Labraca at this point in time are going to be my two starting center mids unless I bring someone in. I have someone in mind. Actually, I have a couple of people in mind, but as it stands right now, it's Labraca and Kokic as my two starting mids. Arturo Alvarez, the 30-year-old Salvadoran, is going to play on the opposite wing of David Accam. Once again, try and use their pace and use their technical abilities to get the ball into the box, feed Michael Deleu, and at the end of the day, hopefully get those goals scored. He's not a bad player. I like his pace as well. It's just, what's he going to do over the next couple years? And the final Dutchman we have on the squad is John Goossens, and to be honest with you, he is brought in basically for his free kicking ability. 16 free kicks, 16 long shots, 16 from the penalty spot. He's great in those spot kicks. Or basically, that's about all he's got. He's decent in the physical stats. He's got some good crossing. Overall, pretty average, but basically he's not going to be taking over for Arturo Alvarez or David Accam. He's going to be backing them up. A lot of Chicago boys coming up now. Either they came through the academy or they've been brought back in. Patrick Doody, a left back, and more than likely is going to be spending some time having some rotation between him and Brandon Vincent. They look fairly similar. It's just that Doody is not as defensively gifted as Brandon Vincent, so more than likely he's going to be a backup. Eric Garrett, 28 years old, can play center and the right, more than likely going to be used as a center back. But once again, I'm pretty stacked at that center back position, so he's not going to be getting a lot of shots there. He's going to be as a backup. Patrick McLean, third choice goalkeeper all the way, and I'm not keeping him on. I'm going to actually just get rid of him. He does not look good. And like I said, he would definitely be playing behind Lamson and Sean Johnson. He's not going to get any play time. Just get him out of here. Michael Stevens has been getting offers from Norwegian clubs, so I want to try and sell him off and bring in some of that money. You get that allocation money for us to use. He's valued at $800,000, so if I can get somewhere around that, that would be great. But other than that, Michael Stevens, I just really don't see him doing anything at this club. Third choice striker all the way, David Arshakian, a 21-year-old Armenian who once again came in during the middle of this past season just because we were not having a lot of great luck with our strikers. And to be quite honest with you, he looks decent enough, but I just don't feel like he's the right fit for this team. He's got 13 finishing, which is good. He has a little decent pace on him as well. I feel like I should probably sell him off and try, or if I can't sell him off, just release him, because I feel like I can bring someone in that's a lot better than him. Rodrigo Ramos, he's a right back that's very pacey, but that's about it. He doesn't have some blow you away defensive stats. He's great on crossing, or I should say he's good on crossing, but like I said, all he's got going for him is his pace, and that's about it. He's going to be a backup. And these final four are going to be loanees out because at this point in time, they're just not good enough for the club. Might as well just get them out there, get them some play time somewhere else, maybe reevaluate them when they come back in, or just get rid of them. But they just are not going to be on this club. They're not going to be played. Alright, now we've gone over the roster, let's take a look at the backroom staff, and oh boy, we don't have anything in terms of scouting. We don't have a director of football, no chief scout, no normal scouts, none of that, so I'm going to look to try and get one of those in as quick as possible. As far as our coaching staff goes, we pretty much have one of everything. An assistant, a coach, a fitness coach, a goalkeeping coach, and a head of youth development. That's about it, I guess. It'd be nice if we could have one more. And as far as our medical staff goes, head physio, chief doctor, and a physio. If we can get in one more physio, that'd be great. That'll push us up above the league median, I'm sure. But yeah, as it stands right now, we need scouting. If nothing else, we need scouting to help our backroom staff. And at least we do have some money in the bank that we can actually use to bring in either players or staff. We have $11.8 million sitting in our account, and we're not really losing all that much per month. We're losing about $60,000 per month, which if I start to remove players from my roster, either by loans or just by waiving them, that's going to get it away from the red and get it up into the black, if not just a little bit into the black. I'll be fine with that. But yeah, as it stands right now, we're pretty solid in terms of money. And now it's time for the thing you've all been waiting for. It's time for MLS specific rules on the monies. And if you take a look in this upper left hand corner, it is the salary cap. Now this is a thing that everybody in the league needs to abide by. Everybody in the league has to stay under $3,650,000. If you go above it, you have to pay some fines and penalties, or you're forced to remove players from your roster to get underneath the salary cap. Depends on which one they want to enforce. But as it stands right now, we have $3 million in our salary cap spent. We have $663,000 to play with, which, like I said earlier, if I sell players, that'll give me a lot more money to play with, which is what I want to try to do. Believe me, I want to try and have as much money in to play with, to bring in more players and to better this roster, because believe me, this roster needs to get better. Then looking at the box below that, it gives you a little bit of a breakdown of the player slots that we have. As you can see, number of designated player slots available 3, and we only have 1 in use, which is David Accam. The one thing that is interesting to me is they don't have the international slots sitting down here. It should say international slots 8, and we have all 8 in use. So I know that if you try and go to Squad Reg, you'll give you an even more detailed breakdown, which when it comes up to MLS squad registration, in the next episode, I'll definitely show you that, but I'm just surprised they don't have it down here. Seeing up here in the top right, we have the transfer funds. So right off the bat, we start with $650,000 in our transfer account, but that can be added onto because of a little thing called the allocation money. Now, the allocation money is split up into 2 different subsections, general and targeted. We'll go over general first. We're going over general first because it's the easier of the two to explain. The ways you can get general allocation money are if you don't qualify for the MLS Cup playoffs, if you sell any player to a non-MLS club team, or you can use that general allocation money as sort of a transfer, not a transfer, but as part of a trade of players back and forth between MLS clubs. So those are the three ways you can get allocation money. Now, the ways that you've been able to sell or to spend allocation money is the aforementioned trading of that money for a player in MLS, or you can push that remaining money into the transfer budget and use that to buy players that are outside the MLS. Straight up go and transfer players into the MLS using that general allocation money alongside with the transfer funds. Now, as far as targeted allocation money goes, the one main thing that it's used for is to bring down the salary cap hit for any designated player that you're bringing into the MLS. Right now, any designated player that you bring in costs $475,000 against your salary cap. If you have targeted allocation money, you can use up to $150,000 of that to bring the hit down. So as it stands right now, I have $400,000 available to me in targeted allocation money. If I decide to bring in 2 designated players, I can use $300,000 of that to take away the salary cap hit for bringing in those new designated players. That's what I've read up on it. That's what I understand it as. I know it's all kind of mind-bending right now, so if you don't want to bring in any designated players, you don't have to worry about the targeted allocation. So if you don't want to go into that, you don't need to know about that. And then finally, I'm going to go over the tactic based off of the player roles that the majority of the players seem to have gone around. So this is basically what I found. And it's taking the shape of a 4-5-1 V formation, or 4-3-3 if you're so inclined, because the wingers are acting more as attacking advanced forwards, inside forwards I should say, David Accam and Arturo Alvarez using their pace and cutting inside. If they don't pass it off, they could shoot it themselves. Deleu and Solniak can play one of 3 positions. They could play trequartista, false 9, or an advanced forward. So I'm going to play around with that striker role, see which one fits, see which one works between the 3 of them. As far as the mids are concerned, it's kind of an amorphous blob that all of them seem to like to play deep line playmaker on support. So I couldn't do that for every single position. But deep line playmakers and then 1 advanced playmaker, just so you can have 1 person pushing forward. As far as my backs go, my center backs, it's really just a standard center defense on defend. And as far as my wingbacks are concerned, either one of them wants to play wingback or complete wingback. So I'm going to try and swap. I don't want to have both of them on one or the other. I'm going to have them one be a wingback and one be a complete wingback, and then swap just to see what works and what doesn't, really. And then finally, goalkeeper is a sweeper keeper on support because Sean Johnson has the great reflexes. He's got the great speed. He might as well act as a 5th defender back there, just going after the ball. So no worries about that. And that is the conclusion of this introduction to the Chicago Fire. I hope I didn't scare you away with some of the MLS stuff that's going on. I want to try and entertain and inform as best as possible so that you can enjoy the series and, like I said, think about possibly doing an MLS save yourself. So I hope that you were interested in this very first episode. And for the next time, of course, we're going to get into our very first match versus New York City FC, and as well as any trades or transfers that will have happened in that time. So until that time, I'd like to thank you all very much for watching. If you like what you saw, of course, hit that like button. Lets me know that you are interested in continuing the series. And if you're new to the series and the channel in general, go and hit that subscribe button. Any comments, suggestions, questions, anything else at all, please in the comment box below. But as always, guys, this is Gendo, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care, and peace out.